So I have this theory that if I leave the house, I will return home with books. It's just a theory, though. I don't think I've ever acquired this many books this quickly in my life. Hello, I'm Gala. Welcome back. If you are new here, thank you for stopping by. We like to talk about books, and we are going to do so today. We have far too many books recently acquired. I can't believe I'm already making another one of these videos. Feels like I just did this. I don't know how this happened. Seriously, I don't know how this happened. They all just kind of appeared, and then I looked at my desk and realized how many things I needed to put away on shelves, and that it got a little bit out of hand. So now we're here today, and we're going to talk about them again. A couple of these books I've already read or am in the process of reading because I just got into some of them. But we're going to talk about them all today, and hopefully you enjoy your time. Get cozy, grab a mug of tea, and shall we dive into this? That was a little too hot. I kind of just burned my tongue. I'm going to wait a couple minutes. I've been practicing making gluten-free bread because my partner is gluten-free, and I've made a couple successful loaves, but let me tell you, it is hard. If anyone has any tips, please let me know in the comments below, because I've been trying, and I've tried in the oven, I've tried in a bread maker. We live like 8,000 feet up in the mountains, so the elevation makes it harder to bake bread as well. And I'm vegan, my partner is gluten-free, so making a vegan gluten-free loaf at really high elevation is challenging, and I've been getting better at it, but I'm also finding that my partner is not eating the bread. I'm the only one eating the bread. So I got permission to make regular bread again because I'm the only one eating the bread. So I'm gonna go back to making regular bread because I make pretty good glutinous bread. Gluten-free is hard, and I like eating gluten-free as much as I can because gluten doesn't always sit well in my stomach, but gluten-free bread's just not the same, you know? Bread's just, I feel like Oprah right now. Like, I love bread. So I'll be going back to glutinous bread, and I will let you know how that goes at a later date. But I said we were going to get into it, and then I talked about bread instead. Let's get into the books. So this will be a bit of a cyclical video. I have a pile of books I found at Goodwill, some books I found in a little free library, some books I purchased, then some books I found at Goodwill, some books I found in a little free library, and some books I purchased. So it went a little bit linear in that way, unintentional on my part. I went to Goodwill with my partner once or twice. They have a big book section. It's really easy to find things there because they're $2 a book, and my little free library in my neighborhood has some really good stuff sometimes. And then, of course, I splurge every once in a while when there's a book sale, and I buy one or two new things. So let's start with some finds at a Goodwill near me. And if you hear any loud background noise today, I do apologize. The wind is whipping pretty hard. I live up in the mountains. There's not much I can do about it. So first up is Wilkie Collins' The Moonstone. I think this is a really pretty little Penguin classics. I have never read Wilkie Collins before. I know he wrote English detective novels, and this cover just kind of spoke to me, and the name The Moonstone kind of spoke to me, so I just picked it up. Again, everything at the Goodwill is like $1 to $2, so it's not a hard sell when you're even lukewarm on something, and worst comes to worst, if I'm not interested in it, I can just put it back in my little free libraries in my neighborhood. So I picked this up not knowing much of what it's about, but I think I kind of want to read this pretty soon. It's pretty long. It's like almost 500 pages, and the text is pretty small, but I kind of want to pick this up soon and just see what it's all about. Next up was Maria Edgeworth's Belinda. Now, if you know me, you know I like Oxford World's Classics. This is one of them. I have no idea what this is, but again, it was like $1, and it's not in bad shape, so I just picked it up. In Belinda, Maria Edgeworth's treatment of gender and race issues is at once comic and thought-provoking. Braving the perils of the marriage market, Belinda learns to think for herself as examples of her friends prove singularly unreliable. sounds interesting. I also found Dostoevsky's The Idiot, and this is a Vintage International. I quite like Vintage International editions, but I don't really like this one, to be perfectly honest with you. I find that a lot of their older cover designs are more appealing to me, and the visuals are a lot prettier. I don't really know that this does Dostoevsky justice, and it is a very soft paper cover, which is a little bit unlike some of their other covers, which we'll actually see later on in this list. I'm not a big fan of this design. This is just me being picky at this point, because I do really want to read this. I've only read The Brothers Karamazov, and I think I was like 15 or 16 when I read that, and I don't think I read it slowly enough. I was a teenager, and I didn't have enough context to understand what I was reading in such a masterpiece of literature, so I really need to reread The Brothers Karamazov, and I want to read any other Dostoevsky. So this was a cool find. I have read... This is a Pervir and Volokonsky translation, and they've translated so many Russian classics. I've read their translation of The Master and Margarita, and I think one more that I can't remember right now, the name escapes me. I know for Dostoevsky, the best tried and true translations are supposedly the Constance Garnett translations, and I really want to read those translations, but again, I found this for like $1, so I just grabbed it. Worst comes to worst, I just re-gift this because it's in good shape, and it's probably a really good book because it's Dostoevsky, so I grabbed it anyway. I also found a book of folk tales from Norway, and this is from University of Chicago Press, which I actually bought a couple of new books from them recently because they have a massive like annual sale on their site that goes so crazy. So thank you to fellow booktuber John David for actually bringing that to my attention with one of his videos. Super duper cool, and I'm excited to talk about those too. This was a really cool find for me. If you've been watching any of my recent videos, you know that I've been getting really into myth and folktale and history just in general for a lot of different cultures and civilizations. So I'm pretty excited to check this out. I thought it was a really beautiful image on the cover, and I like the cover design quite a lot, and I'm just really excited because I don't know anything about Norwegian culture in the first place, let alone folktales, so I'm pretty stoked to check these out. This could definitely be a kind of bedside read one every night read, so I'm pretty excited about this. And the last book in this first Goodwill find was the Monster Manual from Dungeons & Dragons. I love Dungeons & Dragons. I'm a player, I'm not a DM myself, but this is a really nicely illustrated book with a lot of cool info on a ton of different monsters in here. I'm not well versed enough to know like which editions are the best, which are not the best, so I think this is like a 4th edition. I thought I saw that on here somewhere. Yeah, 4th edition, so I don't know if this is like the best edition or not, but again, it was like $2. It's in perfect shape. It's like brand new. This book is $35 new. They're very expensive, so finding this for $2 was just cool, and like I'm not gonna pass that up because I love D&D, and it's nice to be able to pull this out in sessions when I'm playing with my friends and just kind of like look at monsters instead of having to look things up online or rely on someone else to look in their material. So it's nice to have this in my possession as well. Okay, and next up we have 2 books from my local Little Free Library. Now these come from the Little Free Library right outside of the library in my town. We live in a pretty small town in the mountains, so there are like 2 or 3 Little Free Libraries that I know of up here, and there might be more, but there aren't that many, and it's really cool because I go to the library every Saturday actually to play D&D, so I always check the Little Free Library when I go there, and I'll bring books to, donate into there if I have anything, and I'll check to see if there's anything I'm interested in. So it's cool to be able to check it like once a week, because some weeks there's no huge turnover or difference, and then other weeks there's somehow like a ton of new stuff after only just 7 days. So it's cool to be checking it, especially to live in a smaller community and be able to contribute to a Little Free Library that I know other people I may actually know in the community are definitely picking up and finding and enjoying for themselves. And just the same to be able to pick up books from other people in my small community and check them out. It's not something that's new to me. I've been using Little Free Libraries for like a decade at this point. Where I lived before we moved here, there were, I think I could count like 20 Little Free Libraries just off the top of my head that I knew around the surrounding neighborhoods. There were so many where I used to live, and now there aren't as many, so it's a different experience, but it's kind of cooler in its own way because I feel a little more connected to these individual little book boxes because there are so few people actually using them that I feel like I might know those people, if that makes sense. Whereas when I was using all these other ones, there were so many more people using them that it was just a different experience, and neither is better than the other, but I'm just appreciating little free libraries in a smaller town now. So the first thing I grabbed out of that little free library was Tess Gunty's The Rabbit Hutch. Now, I don't know a lot about this. I remember another booktuber named Pato talking about this book like a year or two ago. It was a long time, and the name of the book has just stuck in my head, so I really don't know what this is, but I'm kind of going based off of that very long ago mild secondhand recommendation from another YouTuber, and I remember Pato saying they really liked this book, so I'm just willing to give it a try based on that, because I really like their opinion in books, and they read a lot of things that I'm also interested in. And I also grabbed F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, which I read this in high school, so it's been a long time, but it's a great book. It is a classic, and I would love to reread this. It's the kind of book I've seen in, secondhand bookstores or little free libraries so many times, but they're always just in rough shape. So I've just kind of been waiting to find one cheap or free that was just in good enough condition, and thankfully this one is, so I was glad to just grab this and put another classic back on the shelf that I haven't read in a long time. So next I grabbed 2 books from the University of Chicago. Like I was saying before, they have this massive annual book sale where so much of their collection is on sale for like 6 months. It's like literally half of the year these books are on sale for. It's kind of wild. So if you're at all interested, I'll put the link in the description below, because yeah, there are just so many good books on there. And like I said, I was learning about these from fellow YouTuber John David. I think his actual handle on YouTube is Nicholas of Aushacourt. I believe that's what it is. So I'll link him below as well if you want to check him out. Thank you again to him for bringing this sale to my attention, because there's so much good stuff on their website at such a great discount. And I don't really buy a lot of new books. As you can kind of tell, I go used book shopping in local used bookstores. I go to Goodwill to find cheap stuff, or I just, check out little free libraries. So I don't buy a lot of new books, and it's really cool to find this website with such high quality stuff, with such a massive sale on so many things. It's really tempting to buy a lot of things, and I kind of have to stop myself. And a lot of the stuff I was interested in was actually backlisted or sold out, and that's a little bit of a bummer on its own, but can't stress enough, definitely check this sale out if you're at all interested in some really high quality stuff. First up was On James Baldwin by Colm Tóibín, or Colm Tóibín. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing his name right. I know he is an Irish author, and I've not read him before, so I don't know if I'm getting the pronunciation of his last name correct. But this, actually you can already see, I already read this because I was really, really excited to check this out. I love James Baldwin. I haven't read enough of him, and there's so much more of him I want to read. And reading this book got me even more excited to read even more Baldwin. But this is sort of biographical of Baldwin's life from Colm Tóibín's own perspective. He talks about his relationship to Baldwin's writing and how it has influenced his writing over his lifetime. How Baldwin's focus on religious writing and religious spirituality and race matters and gender and sexuality matters, like how these things have affected Colm Tóibín's own writing and his own life, and how Baldwin really lived through so many different interesting things, and how his writing kind of reflected those things. So this was so good. I will talk more about this in my February reading wrap up when that comes in early March, so stay tuned for that if you're interested in this one. And I also picked up Technics and Civilization by Lewis Mumford. Now this is more textbook than sit down and read, but it looks really, really cool, and I think this was on sale for, I'm not kidding, like $7. It was so cheap, and it's a beautiful, big textbook kind of book with so much good information in it. It's really, really nicely made. Like, I can't stress enough how great the books are from University of Chicago Press and how many good things are on sale. Like, seriously, go check the sale out. There's just a plethora of good things. But this is kind of a study of the machine and industrialization on the world, basically, up to the year 1934. So it really delves into a lot of stuff, a lot of different technological advances, a lot of inventions, a lot of people, famous, not famous, known, unknown, and how their inventions really shaped not only like our idea of civilization, which is obviously in the title, but it's also, I think, critical of these inventions and how they really shaped each other and shaped human understanding. It looks really, really cool. And again, I don't know if this is the kind of thing I would sit down and read cover to cover because it seems pretty dense, but I might, because I'm really interested in learning a lot of this stuff. So I'm pretty excited about this one too. And again, $7. You just can't beat it. All right, so we've run the full loop and we are back to books that I found at Goodwill again. This was on a second trip a couple weeks after the first one. I think like 2 or 3 weeks after the first one. My partner wanted to go there and look for clothes, so obviously I just go straight back to the book section in the corner in the back. So I found a couple more things there because, again, they're just so cheap and it's so easy to find things that you're interested in. So the first one was Simon & Schuster's Guide to Garden Flowers. This is just a coffee table book for me. It's the kind of thing I like to just sit down and look through and learn about new flowers. And I have a birding book on my coffee table as well that I just like to keep there and learn about different birds, or, you know, identify birds when I go out and take a walk in the woods. So this is just another nice book to put on the coffee table. It's in good shape, and I don't think you can really be outdated on classification of plant and flower species, because I think they're pretty set in stone at this point in how we view them. So yeah, I just wanted to pick this up and kind of put it on the table to try and educate myself a little bit more on flowers. I also found a Modern History of France, Volume 1 from the Penguin History section. These are, from what I understand, a little bit outdated. I kind of looked into it a little bit when I got home that evening from Goodwill picking this up, that this is, for what I understand, a pretty comprehensive book for the time that it was written, but not as comprehensive now just because study of history of France has expanded and developed over time. So this is maybe not the most up-to-date read, and I don't know if it's worth reading necessarily, if that makes sense. There may just be other histories of France that are a little more up-to-date that would be more worth my time. So I'm not sure if I'm going to pick this up, but it was a Penguin classic and it was like $1 and it's in good shape, so I just grabbed it. Maybe I'll read it, maybe I won't. Maybe this will go back in a little free library. I also found Black Talk by Ben Sidran, which I'm actually reading right now. I just started this morning. So I'm only through the introduction and a little bit into the first chapter so far, but from what I'm getting as of now, this is basically about how Black culture is shaped by music, and not only that, but it kind of goes further to say that while white Western tradition is a literary tradition, that Sidran is kind of saying how, like, Black tradition is more of an oral tradition, and how music and jazz and bebop specifically shape that oral tradition, and how communication in an oral form is not as credible in the eyes of most white Westerners as literature is. And he's already talking about how the Black Panthers and Malcolm X were really steeped in a literary tradition until they sort of shifted into a more oral and verbal tradition and used music and recording and jazz to speak more on their messages, which is something I've already thought and read about a little bit before in Ta-Nehisi Coates' The Beautiful Struggle. It's an autobiography. That book is really good, and I will definitely talk about that in relation to this. I'm going to talk about this more again in March when I do my February reading wrap-up. So again, stay tuned if you are interested in this. I also picked up Milan Kundera's The Art of the Novel. I have never read Kundera before, but the name sticks in my head so much, and I've always wanted to. I picked this up tentatively because I actually read another book on writing called Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott earlier this month, and spoiler warning for my February reading wrap-up, I did not like it. Not really at all. So I was a little hesitant to pick up another book on writing because I don't think I really want to read very many books on writing right now. And if I do, I'm probably going to take a hot minute to not read any books on writing and just actually focus on my own writing and not think so much about what other people say. But I did pick this up because Milan Kundera is such a name, and I do really want to check out anything from him, really. And because the back cover actually talks about how he brilliantly examines the work of such important and diverse figures as Rabelais, Cervantes, Sterne, Diderot, Flaubert, Tolstoy, and Musil, Kafka, Broch. Like, it sounds like he's actually going to talk about why these classic writers' writing is good, instead of just anecdotally talking about writing, which is what Bird by Bird, I think, was doing. I'll talk more about that later. So I probably won't read this anytime soon. I don't think I want to, because I'm a little shell-shocked from wanting to read more people talking about writing, but I do want to read this at some point, and I think it will be worth it. I also found Life with Picasso by Francois Gillot, and I'm so sorry for butchering that French. Please forgive me, my French accent is terrible because I don't speak any French. I love NYRB, New York Review of Books. I think they have beautiful beautiful books, both inside and out. The design is just gorgeous, and I will pick up anything from them if it is cheap enough and in good enough condition. For $2, you really can't beat it, even if it's a little bit beat up, because it's hard to find them used in the first place. And even if you find them used, they're still like $10 to $12 used, because these new books, they're like $18 to $25, which is not uncommon. That's a pretty standard price, I think, for a lot of new books. And it's worth it because these are beautiful, but it's just so hard to find them used at an actually discounted rate. They tend to still be expensive when they're used. So I'm glad to pick up anything from them for $2 if it's in good enough shape. So I grabbed this. This, from what I understand, is about the writer. I'm not saying her name again because I butchered it the first time, and how she met Picasso in the mid to early 40s and sort of spent time with him and how they shaped each other's lives. So I don't really know a lot about this, but I am curious because Picasso is one of those artists. He's so prolific, obviously. He's one of the most famous household artist names ever, and I like some of his work. I don't like a lot of his work, and I've spent a lot of time with his work. I've seen quite a few shows and like studied a little bit, so I'm curious to read about this, and it seems like it's going to be more about Picasso the man and her relationship to him, and less about Picasso the artist. So I don't know. I am really interested to learn more about this and kind of see what this is about. And the last book in this little Goodwill find was The Poetry of Chaucer by John Gardner. And I believe this is the same John Gardner who wrote Grendel, which is a book I've heard a couple of people talk about before. I know that is about Grendel from Beowulf, but kind of telling the book from Grendel's perspective. And I don't know much about it, but I would imagine it's probably his life before Beowulf slayed him. And if you've been watching any of my videos recently, I recently reread Beowulf in January, so I just talked about that in my January reading wrap-up. If you're at all interested, do go check that out. I'll link the video above. So I read like half of the Canterbury Tales in high school. I loved it. I really, really loved it, and I want to read more Chaucer. I want to pick up the Canterbury Tales and really read it in full and really give it my attention, because this is the kind of thing I don't want to pick this up and read it just yet, because I feel like I want to read more Chaucer and understand his writing a little bit better before I really like read commentary on it, because this is, you know, a lot of his poetry in a big collection together, but there's so much commentary from John Gardner on the poetry, and I think I'd really just like to get to know Chaucer more before I get steeped in this kind of commentary. But I am excited, and it's a really, really like gorgeous book, like so beautiful, such good condition. Southern Illinois University Press. I'm finding so many of these smaller university presses like books recently, and I'm loving it because there's so many well-designed books. So I'm pretty excited about this one, just don't think I'm going to read it quite yet. Okay, and that wraps up our second round of Goodwill books. Now on to our second round of Little Free Library finds. So I just found this small stack of books at my Little Free Library a couple of days ago when I went to the library. I was shocked how many good books there were in there, and I've kind of learned going to Little Free Libraries over time that when people want to get rid of books, they'll get rid of several books at a time, and sometimes you just get one person in your neighborhood who is such a good reader and has so many good books, and they just want to share those good books with the world or with the folks in their community again. And so they put in like a plethora of good things. And sometimes I feel a little bit guilty taking 5 books out at a time, like the 5 we're going to talk about right now. Sometimes I feel a little guilty taking that many books at once, but I try to remind myself I always put books back. Like anytime I take books off the shelf to get rid of, they always go in my Little Free Libraries. I don't resell books. I don't bring them to stores to get rid of. Like, I don't go to Goodwill. Like, they always go back in Little Free Libraries. And I generally keep track of how many books I take out of Little Free Libraries to make sure that I put the same amount back. And for the most part, I end up putting in more books than I actually take out, because I usually try and go over my shelves like once a year to get rid of books. And I usually get rid of like 20 to 30 books every year, and every one of those books goes back in Little Free Libraries. So I tend to put back more books than I actually take. So I try and remind myself of that I'm not being greedy and taking too many books out, because I always put back. I think it's just different because there are so few book boxes in my community now that it's a little like more guilty, because there are so few to actually choose from and all the same people are using the same ones. But I'm just going to remind myself I always get back to, so I'm not going to worry too hard about it. Let's talk about some books. So the first one I found was The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. I've always wanted to read this, and obviously, like, who doesn't know the Disney movie? It might be my favorite Disney animated movie. Like, it's just so freaking good. Every song in that movie is just so freaking good. Quasimodo is so good. All of the statues, like the Michael Alexander gargoyle is just amazing. Count Frollo's villain song is so good. Like, and I think it's the perfect blend for them of like 2D traditional and a little bit getting into that 3D animation realm where it doesn't feel out of place, and like it's just such a good looking movie. It's a good sounding movie. It's just so beautiful, and I probably have to watch it tonight after talking about it so much. Yeah, I've always wanted to read this. I really love these little Bantam classics. I think they're just like pretty books, and they usually have really nice images on the covers. The only thing with this one was that the back cover is kind of coming off a little bit. I can't really do much to fix that because it's so close to the binding, but I'm just going to try and be careful with it. I wouldn't usually grab a book if it was kind of damaged that much. I do have like certain standards I have for like books I want to keep on the shelf, but I just want to read this so bad that like I think I want to read it from this copy, and maybe I'll just put this back in the little free library when I'm done with it, and maybe find myself a cleaner copy or like a Penguin Classic copy so I can have a little more introductory material as well. But I just wanted to read it really bad, so I'm probably going to read this kind of soon because I'm really excited about it. Next thing I grabbed was Evelyn Waugh's Brideshead Revisited. Now, I've heard so many people talk about this book, and in truth, I really don't know what this is about. I think I would have been sold on it just by the cover. I really like the illustration, but I don't know what this is. I've been recommended this by a couple different people, and no one has really told me what it is, but the name has stuck in my head so much that I just figured I'd grab it and see what it was all about. So definitely let me know in the comments below if you've read this before, and if you liked it, and if so, why? And maybe it'll convince me to pick this up sooner rather than later. And another book of the same stature for me as Brideshead Revisited is I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. And I swear, I just heard someone on YouTube talking about this book, like, within the last week. I heard someone saying that they read this and that they loved it, and I tried to go through my YouTube history to find who it was, and I could not for the life of me find the video. So I'm so sorry to whoever just put this book in my mind, because I can't find it. I am truly sorry. I wanted to say who it was that just inspired me to pick this up, and I can't remember, and I'm sorry. And, you know, it's funny because if I hadn't just heard someone ranting and raving about this book, I would not have picked it up, because there is an endorsement from J.K. Rowling on the cover, and need I say any more? I don't think I do. I don't think I would have picked this up if I hadn't heard a glowing endorsement from it just a couple of days ago. So thank you to whoever inspired me to pick this up. I'm looking forward to it. Once again, don't know what this is, but I heard really, really good things, and I think it's kind of a pretty design, so I might pick this up soon and just see how it is. It's not too long, and it seems like a light and fast enough read just based on how much dialogue there is in it, so looking forward to this one. And the other two books, I'm kind of putting these together despite them being different writers, and I think you'll understand why if you've read either of these people before. One of them is Faulkner's Light in August, and the other is Cormac McCarthy's Suttree. If you've ever read Faulkner, you've probably been recommended Cormac McCarthy, and if you've ever read McCarthy, you've probably been recommended Faulkner, because Faulkner is like the granddaddy of subversive prose, and God, he's just so good. I started reading him last year. I read As I Lay Dying and The Sound and the Fury, so this will be my third whenever I eventually pick this up. I had been wanting to read him for so many years, and I just didn't have any of his books, and I kept forgetting to grab him from the library. I had read Cormac McCarthy several times. I think I've read like 4 of his books now, and everybody said that, you know, you gotta read Faulkner. One of my best friends is such a fan of Cormac McCarthy, and he's told me ad nauseum, like, you've got to pick up Faulkner. Like, he is so heavily inspired by Faulkner, you would really, really like him. And of course I finally did pick up Faulkner, and yeah, I love him. He's amazing, and it's crazy how many writers are inspired by this one guy. It's really, really incredible how amazing his writing is, how much he's inspired so many people in the last like 100 years. So I'm really looking forward to this one. I don't know what this is, but he's the kind of writer where I just want to read everything he's ever written. And the same thing is true for McCarthy. I'm really, really excited for this one. I think this is the one from him that I most want to read, because I've read 4 of his other books. I've read Outer Dark, Child of God, All the Pretty Horses and The Road. So if you've read him before, like, you kind of know, and this goes for both of them, like, they have a really unique style of prose where there are a lot of run-ons, long sentences. Some sentences are a paragraph long on their own, sparse, choppy prose, interweaving different narratives of different characters, really going kind of all over the place and building out these stories that you really have to pay close attention to follow. And the thing I always say about Faulkner, which I think is true of McCarthy as well, but it's more true for Faulkner, he's challenging. He's a really challenging writer, but if you give him the time, you will have the time of your life, I promise you, because I think the only people I've ever spoken to who really didn't like Faulkner are the ones I think who didn't give his prose the time. Like, you really have to sit with him and spend time with him, because the way he writes kind of speaks to me and says, I'm writing what I want to write, and I don't care if you don't understand it in the first 10 seconds, right? Like, I think the best thing about both of their writing, but again, even Faulkner more so, is that he trusts his reader. He trusts that if you are picking up his book, you will give him the time, because if you don't want to spend time on a Faulkner, I don't think there's a point in reading it. I really don't, because you can get something out of a Faulkner going through it quickly, but like, you're not going to get much, and you're probably going to walk away very confused and very disgruntled, and you probably won't have a very good time or like the book very much. And again, I think the same is true for McCarthy, to maybe like a little bit toned down of a sense, because McCarthy is not as difficult to follow as Faulkner, but his prose is challenging, right? And he writes these really, really long run-on sentences with little to no punctuation, and in a different but similar sense, he trusts that you're going to go along on the journey with him. Again, I think the journey is worth it if you want to give him the time. And this is the longest book of his that I probably will have read. It's almost 500 pages. Outer Dark and Child of God are both on the shorter side, and All the Pretty Horses is like 300 to 400 pages. So this is the one that my friend who loves Faulkner and McCarthy has recommended to me the most, because he knows that I really like McCarthy's early writing, like Outer Dark and Child of God. Outer Dark, I think, is still my favorite of the 4 that I've read, but I like all of his books, not so much The Road. I'd love to really talk more about McCarthy. Like, once I've read more of his books, maybe once I've read all of them, I'll talk about all of them in like a giant video or something. I think that'd be really fun. Or maybe I could just talk about the 4 or 5 once I read this that I have read. If you're interested at all in a video on McCarthy's writing, please let me know in the comments below, because I really, really like him, and I'm probably going to read this very, very soon because I'm so excited to pick this up. Please let me know in the comments below if you'd like a video on McCarthy's writing or Faulkner's writing, or kind of how they pair to each other, because you can probably tell by this segment of the video that I'm very interested in both of these writers. It's tough to say if I like one of them more than the other, because I think they do similar things in very different ways. They both write very, very darkly, like really, really messed up stuff going on in both of these books. Or I should say both of these writers. I haven't read either of these books yet, but yeah, but please check out either of these writers. I think they're both worth your time if you want to give them the time, and I'm just so excited to check this one out. And this is kind of what I was talking about with old vintage internationals, because look at how beautiful these books are. And maybe I'm alone in this. I just, like, this book is just so gorgeously designed, is it not? All of the old Cormac McCarthys from Vintage International have this similar design where they're like mostly black covers with a white band at the top and like gold font to kind of do the title. They're just beautiful, and I'll put an image of this book in the updated style on screen, because I just don't think it holds a candle. They use like stock images, and they don't feel like they really speak to what the book is saying. Based on the other ones that I've read, I don't think the design really works very well. And that's kind of what I say, like, this is not a poorly designed book. I'm not trying to trash the design of this cover, but it's like, look at this compared to this. Like, there's so much more personality and identity to these older ones than these newer ones, right? Like, and maybe this does feel right for the, Dostoevsky, but it just loses that touch. It loses the personality compared to something like these older ones. And I think there's a lack of cohesion in a lot of the newer designs, where like these older ones just feel so cohesive. Like, every Nabokov in the old Vintage International feels like it has so much style, feels like they were all designed on a giant table right next to each other, and every single one of them was given the same love and treatment and like made sure that all of them fit and work together cohesively as a unit for like 20 books, right? And I think they do that across a lot of the newer books as well. But again, I think a lot of the newer designs just really lack the personality, and they feel like they lack love. I don't know the other word for it. I feel like they lack love because they just don't feel like they're given the same kind of love and time and attention as these old cover designs are. And it's kind of a shame because I don't know, like I always go for the old ones. You'll see the new McCarthy, you'll see the new any writer for Vintage International in stores all the time, and I don't buy them. Like, I never buy them because I don't think they're well-designed books. Like, I don't care if I see Suttree 50 times on the shelf. If every one of those times is the new cover, I'm not buying it. Like, I'm not gonna read the book until I find the cover that I want. And maybe that seems silly because I might be stopping myself from reading a book that is really good and a book I should read because it would be really valuable to me, maybe at a certain point in my life. But I don't want a book on my shelf that I don't think is like well designed, you know? And maybe that's like petty in a certain sense, but listen, this book was free. I didn't pay for this. I got this out of a little free library, and this book was $1, and I still think it was worth it. But if I'm gonna spend like $5 to $10 on a used book, I don't want a copy that I don't like, you know? I've been talking about this for way too long. I could probably make a whole video on this and like cover design from my own perspective. Maybe I will, because I think I'd actually really like to talk about this more. Once again, please let me know in the comments, like, is this part of the video of any interest to you, and would you like to hear me talk more about cover design and what I think works and what I think don't? I do have a fine arts background, and I like to think I kind of know what I'm talking about because I'm decently good with this sort of thing. So yeah, if you have any interest in hearing me talk about this anymore, please let me know. I'm gonna shut up for now. And we are moving on to our final stack of books for the day. These were purchases, once again, new purchases, which is not common for me, but I wanted to read an essay by Walter Benjamin called Unpacking My Library. So I looked online to try and see where I might find an actual physical copy of this instead of just printing a PDF offline, which I could do, but I wanted to see if there was an actual copy in publication that I could maybe just read from. Maybe an essay collection, you know? And I ended up finding a small little bound and pressed copy from Columbia University's Eris Gems collection. And this is just kind of like a little pamphlet with the essay published in there. It's just the essay. It's like, I don't know, 20 pages long. And it's just this like beautifully designed little sort of zine pamphlet with, you know, like a nice illustration graphic on the cover, all like this slate gray, and then an image of the author on the back, which was a surprise to me because I didn't know that was on there when I got it in the mail. And I was really excited to find this because, you know, it was $6. And if you really weigh it out, like, is a 20-page essay worth $6? Not really, when I could just print it offline. But I like physical books. I like beautiful books, in case you couldn't tell by what I was talking about in the previous segment. And I felt like this was worth it for $6 because it's not that much. It's something I really want to read, and I decided to treat myself to this. And then I made the mistake of looking at the rest of the collection because they have about 40 small publications on there, and I bought 6 of them because I couldn't help myself. There was a sale, so one of them was free, but I bought 6 of them, and I narrowed this list down from like 15 that I really wanted to 6. So I feel pretty good about that because I never buy new books. They were only $6, so I only spent like $30 on this stack, which is not terrible because I don't spend my money on anything except food, rent, and books. Like, I don't buy anything else except books, so I don't feel terrible picking myself up a little stack because there were a couple of really cool things in here. So the first was Walter Benjamin's Unpacking My Library. Like I said, it is an essay that I've been interested in checking out. I'm working on building out a writing project for myself right now, and this is very in line with the research and reading and writing I've been doing recently, so I'm very excited to read this. I don't know anything more of it than the title, and I've read a couple of essays from Walter Benjamin when I was in school, so pretty excited to check this out. The other was James Baldwin's essay, The American Dream is at the Expense of the American Negro, and I just said essay. This might actually be a speech. I'm not sure, but in case you couldn't tell by earlier in the video, I really like Baldwin, and I really want to read more of him, so I was really interested to find this one. And again, look at these beautiful author images on the back. Like, these are just so nicely designed with little graphics on the front. Like, again, I know $6 doesn't feel worth it for like a 20-page essay or a 20-page speech, but at the same time, like, they are really, really nicely put together. And I kind of wish the binding was a little more solid than just being like, you know, stapled, but they're well constructed, they're well cut, they're well, you know, like printed and everything. So I am excited about these, and like just excited to read any more Baldwin. Next up is Chief Seattle's The 1854 Oration, and this is a speech that I believe he gave to the U.S. government, basically saying screw you, because the U.S. government has been horrendous to its indigenous people for, we all know, hundreds of years. And this one felt important, and this one felt really interesting and up my alley, because I like reading from indigenous writers, and I like to learn more history of indigenous people in America. So I am looking forward to checking this out as well. And I think the beautiful thing is that these are all so short. They're like 15 to 30 pages per little pamphlet, and you know, you could just sit down and read these in one sitting and reread them and keep them out on the coffee table, which I love doing, so that I can pick them up, you know, and reread them again whenever I feel like it. So I think these are nice for like a day when I don't have a lot of time to sit down and read. I can just pick one of these up and like digest a complete story or a complete speech or a complete idea and sit with that when I just don't have a lot of time in a day. So I am, you know, pretty stoked about these. I also grabbed Lauro de Bosis's The Story of My Death, and I don't really know much about this person or this story. This is the one I knew the least about. All of the other ones, I either knew the writer or had heard of the piece of writing before. And in this one, I believe he was a fighter pilot who wrote this small excerpt just shortly before his death in either like a plane accident or some kind of wartime maneuver. I don't know exactly, but it sounded really, really interesting as kind of a posthumous account of a wartime pilot's life. And I'm really, really interested in posthumous stories. I've been reading more posthumous stories or theoretically posthumous works of fiction in the last like year or two, and been really, really liking that as a weird subgenre. Again, maybe that's a video I can make. I'm kind of throwing a lot of these out there in this video. If you'd be interested in hearing more about different stories and fictional and non-fictional accounts of posthumous works of literature that I have kind of read, please let me know in the comments below. I would love to actually make a video about that as well. I need to start making a list because I'm throwing so many ideas out there for videos I'd actually like to make in the future. Let me know if you're interested in any of these things. I also grabbed Camus' Helen's Exile. So I believe this one is a work of fiction. I'll show Camus on the back because he is such a handsome French Algerian. Yeah, this one I again don't really know a lot about. I have read 2 books from Camus, the first being The Fall and the second being Exile in the Kingdom. The former is fiction and the latter is fiction short story. And I really, really liked both of those. Like, he is freaking amazing, and I haven't read The Stranger or The Plague, which I think are his 2 most famous books, but this is, yeah, just a small piece of fiction from him. So I figured I'd pick it up because I don't know if you can find this in his other short story collections, because I know there are other collections of short stories out there. Like, I think he has one called The Myth of Sisyphus. I think that's a short story collection from him. I don't know if you can find Helen's Exile in other collections, but again, it was cheap, and I figured I'd grab it because who knows. And the last one I grabbed from Eris Gems was Dracula's Guest by Bram Stoker. So obviously everybody has heard of Dracula before. This, from what I understand, is an unfinished and unpublished chapter from Dracula. So I want to read Dracula this year. I've never read it before, and I've wanted to for so freaking long. And I'm a big fan of Robert Eggers' movies, and Nosferatu came out a couple of months ago. I saw it like 3 times in a row because I love that movie so much. I'm a big fan of the Nosferatu story. I'm a big fan of Robert Eggers' direction and movies in general. And I really just want to read Dracula this year for sure. So I picked this up because I think this will be a nice companion piece to when I do read Dracula, as sort of an unpublished piece of the work that just didn't make it into the final book. I just figured I'd pick this up, and the bat on the cover is so beautiful. And that is all I have for you today. Thank you again for spending some time with me. I know I threw a lot of different ideas out there for different videos. Like I said throughout the video, if you have any interest in any of those video ideas, please let me know in the comments below. If you have any other ideas for videos you'd like to hear and see from me, please let me know in the comments below. I'd really love to know what people who are enjoying my content recently would like to see from me, because I have so many ideas for things I want to do. Like, I want to do a bookshelf tour at some point soon. It's getting away from me because it's kind of a larger and more daunting thing to talk about, and it requires a little more energy from me. But I promise a bookshelf tour is coming. I want to continue doing, monthly reading wrap-ups and really diving into more analysis and discussion of each of the books I'm reading, because the last video I put out, I think, is my favorite one I've done so far. I really like sitting down to talk in depth about the books I'm reading, and that's kind of the reason I made this channel in the first place, is to really talk meat and potatoes of the books I'm reading. So please let me know if there's anything you'd like to see more from me. Please let me know if there's a certain type of video that you like. Maybe you really like these book hauls. Maybe you really like the discussion videos. Like, I'd love to know, because I want to know what people are enjoying and kind of move forward, not in a direction that just caters to what people want from me. I want to know what people want and kind of mesh that with what I want to do and figure out a structure for this channel and a style of video that really meets my needs but also meets your needs. So please, let me know what you've been enjoying. Let me know what you want to see more of from me, because I'm just having fun putting these videos together. So I think that's all I have today. Thank you again for spending some more time with me. Your time is precious, and the fact that you want to spend it with me means the world. So thank you again. If you have read any of the books that I shared today, please let me know. Let me know what you think of them. Let me know why I should read them, why I shouldn't read them, why I should throw them back in the little free library, or why they should be on my favorite books list. So that is all I have for you today. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.